we do a flag salute, I will do a roll call. Jason Beebe.
Here.
Janet Hutchison.
Here.
Patricia Youngman.
Here.
Gail Merritt.
Here.
Jeff Papke.
Here.
Teresa Rodriguez.
Hello.
Good to see you. We are all here, so please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
The flag.
United States of America,
United States of America.
and to the republic,
And to the republic,
one nation under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty and justice for all.
That leg time is a killer.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Forrester, are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. There is one addition. On resolutions, number 7, resolution number 1434 does not meet the threshold in terms of dollars for the council meeting agenda tonight, so that will be handled by staff. So we're removing number 7, resolution 1434 off the agenda.
All right. For the consent agenda, we have circulated the regular meeting brief for March 24th as well as for April 7th. Are there any questions, concerns about those meeting agendas, or those meeting briefs rather?
This is Janet. I just have one for 324.
Okay.
So my phone went out, so I wasn't able to vote on the under motions and outcomes. I did not vote on resolution 1431 or to adjourn the meeting.
All right. We will make note of that.
Thank you.
As corrected, does anyone else have a concern or objection to the circulated minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as circulated with the correction of those, with that correction from Janet?
This is Patricia. This is Gail. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. This meeting is being recorded. With the changes.
Thank you, Gail. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And that was from Janet or Patricia?
It was Patricia.
Hey, Patricia, thank you very much for seconding. Again, any questions, concerns? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call vote. Aye or nay. Aye for in favor, Jason Beebe.
Aye.
Janet Hutchison.
Aye.
Patricia Youngman.
Aye.
Gail Merritt.
Aye.
Jeff Papke.
Aye.
Teresa Rodriguez.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so we have a unanimous vote. Moving on the agenda, we have under visitors' appearances and requests, we did receive one letter, and I did visit with the individual who sent it, so I would like to read that into the minutes. This comes from Karen Hahn Crucci, and her comment: I am a local small business in Crook County, and I am getting more and more concerned about our local shutdown of businesses. The longer COVID-19 continues to make its mark in Oregon, the clearer it is that most of Oregon is not really at risk. I agree there is a certain age group that should really be careful, but that and the fact that we have only one case that is travel related in Crook County makes me wonder why our whole community is shut down. I believe our local government should make a stand by May 1st and allow small businesses to open. There are many things you could do to make people safer, require some kind of facial covering, and then maybe require businesses to adhere to the 6-foot rule between customers. As you know, many businesses are already doing these things, and I'm sure local businesses would be happy to do whatever it would take to open up. Local businesses are drowning, and it is up to you to make a stand. Save the community and the people that are out of work because of this pandemic. We are not New York. We are Crook County with one local person that tested positive at this point. And you are doing much greater damage than the virus could do. So that is the comment from Karen Hahn and her perspective. And then under additional visitors and appearances, we have with us, and I'm losing my place on the agenda,
Mike Darling?
Mike Darling, who is the manager of the 4th District, 4th Region, Region 4 for ODOT. So, Mike, would you log in and speak up, please, for us?
Yes, can you all hear me? Mike
Yes,
Darling,
we can.
Great.
Thank you.
You're not going to be able to see me. I think I've tried several times, and it just keeps kicking it back on the Zoom. So I'll just have to weigh in verbally. And thank you. And actually, I am a project manager, but not the manager of Region 4. That's 2 bosses above me. So, but you gave me a pay raise, so that's appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you,
yeah. So, Mayor and City Council, we actually visited with City Council back on February 25th, and we gave you kind of an update about the access management process and the things that were coming down the pike. And the reason I'm here is city staff thought it might be good for me to kind of show up again and just remind everyone kind of where we're at in the process. So, again, we're going through this process that we're required to by law. One of our first things we have to do is prepare a draft access management methodology and distribute that to property owners in the 3rd Street corridor, and to property owners also when we're looking at doing some improvements at Combs Flat and Lynn Boulevard, that intersection. So we're also sending it to the property owners there. So that they actually received a copy of it, went out in certified mail, and they have 21 days to comment, and actually there's a formal appeal process and methodology. We've already had a couple of comments back. We already had one written comment. They weren't appealing anything. They just had questions. They had comments. They had suggestions, which is always appreciated. And then as of Thursday, April 16th, that comment period essentially will end. And then we'll take any modifications and suggestions, recommendations provided by property owners and by other folks, put it into the methodology, and then we'll come back with a final methodology and then ask City Council to, for concurrence agreement on that, and the region manager will, sign that. And then we start the access management strategy process, which allows us to go through and look at each approach and look at all the criteria, economic viability, driveways, ADA ramps, other traffic accidents, a history of accidents and collisions at a particular approach, that kind of thing, and make recommendations for each approach. And that'll be in the strategy. Then we'll be coming back to City Council on that. But again, it's just, you probably have maybe had some questions. I know Steve had some questions from someone. And again, this is part of that process. We're interested in any comments, any suggestions. But this is, again, part of that process that we have to go through as required by the legislature for devising and creating that strategy for access management on that corridor. Do I have any questions?
So, Mike, this is Janet. You said you've got a couple comments, and have
Yes.
those been positive towards your methodology?
Well, they were. One of them was a little confused, like, well, what are you doing to my approach? Was kind of one of the questions, and we're like, well, we're not there yet. This is how we make decisions, right? How do we provide that context and the criteria? So I agree, it's kind of unwieldy, it seems a little bit, but that's kind of part of the process we have to go through. And there were some good comments and suggestions about maybe some of the language, try to make it less formal, and we've tried really hard to do that, so we're interested in any input to make it less government and more understandable. So we're appreciating that. But we haven't had anything negative come across anyone yet.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Mike, when I read through that, I noticed that there was a comment about dual access or multiple accesses onto the highway from a single property. Is there going to be a restriction on accesses that if there is more than one from a property?
Not necessarily. I mean, again, it goes back to the criteria. Just because a property has two approaches they're utilizing doesn't mean that anything is happening to it or not. We have to look at each property. Do they permitted for? What's the permit? Do they have a permit? What does the permit say? What is it use of business? What's happening as cars are coming and vehicles and pedestrians are interacting at that approach? So there's no one criteria that says, oh, they have two approaches, we're going to remove one. No, that's not how that works.
Tell me about bicycle travel along that, the changes that you're going to make.
With the access management, that's a good question. And the strategy doesn't deal with bicycles per se. It looks at, mobility on the sidewalk, and that's typically pedestrians and maybe all forms of active transportation. But we're not looking specifically necessarily at bicycles or accommodating bicycles. We're really looking at the approach, what's happening with motor vehicles as they come in and out, what does the circulation look like as we look at rebuilding corners to make them ADA compliant. How does that impact the approach? So we're not really at this point looking at, for the access management strategy, looking at bicycles. I think that's a good question, and that's kind of the bigger context of what do we do with bicycles on 3rd Street? And that's, I think, a conversation that we should have in the project team about what do you do with bicycles and how do you provide safer environment for them, something with less stress. Do we need to look at putting them maybe on 2nd and 4th and routing that? I don't know. But that specific issue isn't one we're actually looking at with this document, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Forrester, did you receive any comments or questions you want to raise? Are there any questions from the staff that you would like to raise on this?
No. I think,
Eric?
No.
Okay.
Mike, do you have more for us? More to report, or?
I don't. Nope.
Share with us.
Pretty much. I just wanted to we've been getting feedback. The stuff is out there with property owners, and we've been getting some feedback. And again, I heard from Steve that there was some feedback. So we just want to let people know where we're at in the process, and then we'll keep checking in with City Council as we go through this, so you know what's happening.
What are you looking at for time frame before you start getting into some final decisions in the process?
So the 16th we'll finalize. Well, that'll end for the comment period for the access management methodology, and then that access management strategy. We hope to get that out, and actually we've been working on some of those pieces as we've been to try to stay ahead of our schedule. But we would like to have the actual strategy done by design acceptance, which is later this summer. So that our goal is to have the access management strategy confirmed and signed and agreed upon by City Council and the region manager, done by this summer.
Okay. I know there has been talk over the years of the possibility of looking at a couplet for a portion of 3rd Street and 4th Street. Is that going to be, at what point should that be raised?
It's not in my project scope.
Okay.
That's not.
All right.
Yeah.
So Mayor Effelman, this is Eric Hahn, City Engineer. So that's a separate topic. We're currently working with ODOT on a transportation growth management grant that would provide funds to determine the layout of that couplet if and when it's needed and how that would impact the Y and the redesign of the Y. So separate subjects, but we're definitely working on it.
And so this project is specifically from Combs Flat Road on the east to Meadow Lakes on the west, plus some with the roundabout. As well
it's 3rd Street. It's 3rd Street, like you said, from Combs Flat west to Meadow Lake, and then includes signal upgrades, that kind of thing. And then we're also looking at short-term safety improvements at the intersection of Combs Flat and Lynn Boulevard.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Any
Can
other
I
questions?
ask a question? Yes, I have one. You've been talking about safety, Combs Flat and Lynn. What about Knowledge in 3rd Street, where so many cars are coming out of the middle school? I picked my grandkids up, and that is kind of a nightmare.
Yes, we've actually had some discussions around that. That's kind of a challenge, how that Knowledge Street intersects. I mean, it's a wider street and then suddenly narrows down just before the bridge. Again, I think those kind of things we get identified. I don't, whether they become part of this project or not. It's not currently in the scope to do anything about that. But again, it's one of those things we want to kind of take a look at, note, and then what would that look like? What would the improvements look like? What is it? How do we make that safer for pedestrians, especially as school? But it's not
the pedestrians
currently
do
in
have
the
a
scope,
challenge.
focusing on that. Yep. Yeah, we do. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mike, thank you very much. Unless there are any other questions.
Steve, I have another one. This is Janet. So, Mike, you talked about some of those accesses are already permitted. So do you have, is half of them permitted, or do you have a statistic on how many are?
I don't have a statistic now. I can get that to you. A number of them have paper permits. The ones that don't have an actual paper permit are assumed to be permitted. There was a law passed several years ago that basically took any existing approach on the state highway, and if it didn't have a paper permit, it was assumed to be permitted. Most of them that I've seen are assumed to be permitted. They don't have paper permits. But we don't have, again, if you're looking at, do they have a permit? Some of them have paper permits. Some of them are assumed to be permitted, kind of the legal status. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Mike, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you for your opportunity to come back with some questions. And again, we'll be wrapping back around here probably next month or so with the final access management methodology to have City Council concur with that so we can continue on the process. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Under council business, we have consideration of proclamation, Older Americans Month. Councilor Merritt, you want to lead on with that?
Yes, I was approached this winter by the Council of Aging whether we could have a proclamation for Older America Month in May, because we've got quite a bit of population over 65, and the Central Oregon Aging serves Jefferson, Deschutes, and Crook County, and they are all going to have a proclamation for older Americans. This group has a lot of services for seniors. They're involved with our Senior Citizen Center here, Meals on Wheels, and I think it would be a good thing for us to do.
Okay. Any comments? Thoughts? Counselor, are we in conflict of interest when we are over 65 and we may be voting in favor of this?
Could be.
I don't think you'd get in trouble.
Okay. Sorry about that. Then do we need a motion for?
Generally, we don't need a motion for proclamation.
I guess my
collaboratively, and if there's any objections, we take that on the floor.
So my question is, are there any objections to this proclamation? Hearing none, we will read this proclamation at the next council meeting. So that will be on the 24th?
28th, I believe, yeah.
27th. Okay, at the next council meeting. All right, thank you. So moving on.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Klon, consideration of sale of real property. Eric?
Good evening. For the record, City Engineer Eric Klon. I'd like to discuss a piece of property the city currently owns and get some input from council how we would like to move forward with it. So with that said, James, could you share the PowerPoint? So this is a lot the city currently owns in Baldwin Industrial Park. So for those of you that might not know, Baldwin's located up by the airport. Short history on this industrial park. The city actually developed this back in 1996. So the city owned the property, city put in the utilities, created the lots, put in the streets. Our public works department actually did a lot of that work, installed the street, sewer, the water. The thought of that at the time was the council wanted to encourage economic development, and the city currently owns one remaining lot up there. So the next slide. So this remainder lot, you can see in the map there where it's located. It's map number 151512B on Southwest Cessna Drive. It's just a little over 2 acres. There's been some potential buyers that have been identified, and they would encourage economic growth if they were to acquire the piece of property. The city's owned this piece, plus many others since 1996. Very little interest in the property right now. You can see there's quite a few vacant lots. Some are significantly larger. So with that said, next slide. So ORS 221.725 governs the sale for any real property that a city or a government would own. The first step in this process, our council must consider it either necessary or convenient to sell. So that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. And then if we decide that it is necessary or convenient to sell, step 2 would be a public hearing, would be noticed. We'd put that in the Central Oregonian, and we'd hold a hearing. Tentatively, we would hold that hearing on April 28th if we decided to move forward with this. And we're just interested in potentially selling this piece of property. The suggested motion is below. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding the piece of property.
Questions from anyone? I know over the years it's been looked at for a variety of different purposes, but nobody has actually made an offer on that property. So if there are no questions or comments, is there anyone willing to make a motion to approve the potential sale of the property?
Would we need a motion, Counselor, or we just bring it back?
No, we wouldn't need a motion to determine whether it was convenient to sell the property.
So that's what the motion should be for.
The proposal is that the City Council, serving in its role as local contract review board for the city, hereby approves the city entering into personal service.
Mayor,
oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong line. I'm sorry.
So the suggested motion is that if someone were to move, it would move that it would be convenient to sell the real property identified as map number 151512 B, tax lot 001700 on Southwest Cessna Drive, Prineville, Oregon, and a public hearing, and that a public hearing be scheduled and appropriately noticed.
Thank you.
Okay.
To be
Thank you.
clear, we're not currently selling the property. We would just be saying that, we would consider, and it is convenient to potentially sell the piece of property.
We discussed this property before, haven't we? When up there's that company that's looking at purchasing it for building.
Multiple times.
We've discussed it.
Yeah, we've discussed that property. Okay.
We've discussed it previously. We don't really want to get into the details right now. We're just asking, is it convenient to sell it? And if it is, then the next step at the next meeting would be to hold a public hearing and discuss the details of the sale.
I would make a motion to hold a public hearing and consider the sale of real property.
I'll second that motion. This is Patricia.
Does it need to be specific to that particular lot? Do we need clarification?
We need two clarifications. We need clarifications of the specific lot, and we also need the motion that it's either convenient or necessary to sell the lot.
Okay. Teresa, did you hear that?
Can you currently PowerPoint? We have a suggested motion there.
Okay. It is convenient to sell real property.
Are you going to withdraw your motion?
I'm going to
I
withdraw
need to withdraw the second.
I'll withdraw the second.
I withdraw the motion.
Okay.
So I would move. So then I would move that it is convenient to sell real property identified as map. How do I get rid of my? Okay, map number 1515-12B, tax lot 001700 on Southwest Cessna Drive, Prineville, Oregon, and a public hearing should be scheduled and appropriately noticed.
And I'll
Is there a second?
it.
Right, thank you. And that's Patricia that seconded it?
That's Patricia, you got it.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Motion from Janet, second from Patricia. Questions?
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much.
Questions or concerns? Okay, hearing none, I'll do a roll call voting. Vote aye for in favor and nay for opposing. Jason Beebe.
Aye.
Janet Hutchison.
Aye.
Patricia Youngman.
Aye.
Gail Merritt.
Aye.
Jeff Papke.
Aye.
Teresa Rodriguez.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so we are unanimous in support of that. And my question then to our attorney is, what is the process for the public hearing, because we're dealing with a new format of live streaming, etc.
Yes. Yeah, so we're going to anticipate this to have a public hearing on the 28th, which would be our next council meeting. Public notice will go out tomorrow on the web page.
Okay.
However, we'll also have notice be published within the Central Oregonian, but that will be next Tuesday. In regards to the public hearing and the actual participation by our citizens, they're going to be able to do it one of two ways. The first way would be to do it at the actual meeting, which will be by phone for their ability to testify. So there'll be a number that's presented in the public notice. They would call in to that number, and at the time during the public hearing, there'll be an opportunity for them to be able to testify. The system of how I understand it, once they talk, it'll sort of give our IT department a green light. Then you'll be able to recognize them. They'll be able to say their name and then provide their testimony. And then we would do that until there was nobody on the phone that was willing to continue to talk. The other way that can be done is that people will be able to submit written comment to be read into the record and read to council. They can do that one of two ways. They can either do it by mail, by sending it to City Hall, attention Lisa Morgan, 387 Northeast 3rd Street, Prineville, Oregon, 97754, or by email at cityhall@cityofprineville.com. Both of those methods will be part of the public notice. We just ask that in regards to the public comments that those be received, or written comments, those be received by 5 p.m. on the 28th of April.
And that would require them to identify themselves by name and address.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else that we need to, and that will be, that will be in the comment, or in the public notice?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Moving on. COVID update. Staff reports and requests. And this is an opportunity just for the council to talk about and share and discuss things that they're concerned about, or anything that they feel ought to be on next week's council meeting, or not next week, our next city council meeting in 2 weeks. Comments from anyone?
I'm just concerned that not enough people are actually being tested and the numbers surrounding those statistics. That's one of my concerns.
I hear that. I know that the governor had a presentation today, and the expectation, the metric they're trying to use is 15,000 tests in Oregon per week. I'm not sure whether that's adequate or not, but that's what their goal is for the time being, moving forward.
Yeah.
But
I personally know 2 people who had all of the symptoms, including the fever, and they were told that they weren't testing unless they were being admitted to the hospital. And so there's 2 people in Crook County that I personally know that we're sure, that I'm 98% sure that's what they had by all the symptoms, and they feel the same way too because they were talking to me about it. And they are concerned also because if these people don't get tested and they think that they just have the flu, they're more apt to go out into the public too soon and thus affecting more people. And so that's one of my biggest concerns is because there's a 14-day, but once you start feeling better and you don't have that diagnosis, are you really going to ride out that 14 days in your home?
And are you contagious after that? We don't know.
Correct.
Good point, Teresa. Very good point. And Steve and I are both on committees that are meeting that will share some of that information and concern. I did share that same concern to the governor's office this afternoon in an email. So those are issues. Any other concerns moving forward?
Yeah, Steve, this is Patricia. And
yes.
Some of the concerns I've been hearing out in the community is that there's a lot of snowbirds coming back from other states, and people are kind of worried that they might bring some of those things in the hot spots with them when they come.
What would you recommend for those folks when they're coming in to town?
Personally, I think maybe when they come back in, even a 14-day in their home by themselves or isolation, to stay at home for 14 days before they come out into the community would be a really good idea.
A self-quarantine? Okay.
Self-quarantine, exactly.
Good point. All right. I can make a note of that in the message from the mayor on Friday.
One other concern that I have is the social distancing and closing parks and recreational areas that are outdoors. These kids, I have an 8-year-old at home, and he is going absolutely bonkers. And it's pretty easy to socially distance yourself at as large as our parks are, as large as some of the outdoor areas that are currently closed. I was surprised. We took a drive through Fossil last weekend, and the Killarney National Monument was closed. And I think there was maybe 3 people on that road from Killarney to Antelope as it was. So, I think it's, we're a lot of people say yes, and I understand the spread of it, but the social distancing of 6 feet, I think, is not going to be a problem in some of the larger outdoor recreational areas.
Okay.
Teresa, I hear your concerns. I think the struggle is the reasonable versus the unreasonable people. And yes, maybe it's responsible and unresponsible is a better term. Dealing with our students in school, I know they're going nuts just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the magic answer is. I mean, I think we want to try to protect ourselves, protect others. I know my office here in my house, I look out onto my neighborhood and I'm amazed at the number of people that are out, but they're doing it responsibly. It's you can tell it's couples or families, and they're walking their dogs, they're riding their bikes. So I think there's those opportunities. I guess I just am concerned. Yes, we want people to be out, but at the same time, what's the best way to try to manage that? And if we do start opening too soon, then who's going to manage it? Who's going to take on that responsibility, and what's the risk? There's so much about this we don't know. And, maybe it'd be good for us as we have a meeting, maybe if we have either hospital representatives or health department or somebody just to be here and kind of say, okay, here's the facts, here's where we are. Because that's the part I don't want to be making decisions based off of inaccurate information or feelings. I'd rather do it off of data. And I know the data we've got is inaccurate, and this thing, they're trying to crunch numbers as fast as they can, and we're flying by the seat of our pants.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel for everybody that's being affected by this so many different ways. And it's just trying to, how do we balance everything the best way that we can? And not every decision we make is going to be great. Not every decision we make is going to be perfect. But I guess I'd rather see us make decisions based off of some of those facts and science versus just feeling.
Well, and I do feel for the small business owners because my trucking business is struggling bad. Lumber's not moving because people don't want drivers in their shipping yards and in their shipping offices. Cattle, we're hearing of the cattle and the pork processing plants are shutting down, so nothing's moving there. My trucking business is taking a huge hit, and my bookkeeping business really is too, because obviously my businesses aren't doing as many transactions. So, I'm not sure how I'm going to fare through this. And so I feel for those small business owners, and I'm hoping that they look at the realism and they do look at the science as far as reopening and teaching people how to social distance or be protected and things like that, so that we can get this back on the road. Because you look at from the hairdresser to the 50 employee mom and pop business, we're drowning unless you have a job that's paid and your employer is paying you through this, or you can collect unemployment. It's going to be a mess.
Does anybody feel that the city council should be taking any action at this point on behalf of the city?
I would really advocate, at the state government level of, we need to figure out how these small businesses can open, because in our rural areas, our mainline business is small business. And if we don't protect these small businesses, we're going to be in a world of hurt when things do open back up, because they won't have the money to restart. And I don't know what's going to happen, because if I go under, I'm not going to have the money to restart when this is all done, because I'm going to be under, I'm going to have bad credit. My house is in jeopardy. There's a lot of things that are in jeopardy for me personally as a business owner. And I know that other people are, they depend on those businesses to pay their mortgages and for their startup costs. So they're not going to be able to just jump right back in when it does open back up. So there needs to be something moving faster as far as education and PPE or whatever the case may be on how do we open these businesses back up safely.
Okay.
But somebody, I really want to advocate for the small businesses, because I think sometimes Salem forgets about us.
All right.
I think
Any other comments?
Teresa, and I guess maybe take another look at essential versus non-essential, or what can operate. You know, I try not to watch the news and some of the crazy stuff that happens, but Florida, I think it was, just declared that the World Wrestling Federation is essential. I have no idea how they do that. And I apologize, but that just makes no sense to me. But with these other ones, like you mentioned, the hairdressers, some of these small service businesses that somebody said is an essential, well, I guess define essential.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we, because you're right, you know, our economy is small business. Mm-hmm. And how do we get somebody to take another look at that? I know some of the things we're dealing with in regards to education, they're governing from a cul-de-sac over in the valley versus understanding what's happening out here in rural Oregon. And I'd be absolutely in favor of anything like that where we can take a look and say, okay, yeah, you said we have to do this, but they can, and here's how.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we help them and support them to get these businesses back up on their feet?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the state parks. I went camping actually a month ago or so. I went camping up on the river, on the Crooked River, in one of those little campgrounds. I was never within closer to 20 to 30 feet from any other person other than my family that I was there with. You know, but you go to the state parks in the valley, you go to the state parks over at the coast, and they're on top of each other. The camp trailers they're within 6 feet of each other just alone, let alone, the campers themselves. But over here, we do have different, it's a whole different world over here from the valley. And, I think we're always talking about advocating for rural Oregon. And this is one of those scenarios I think we really need to start advocating for, because, a hairdresser can take one appointment at a time and, use those safety precautions and not have a lot of people it's not a high traffic area. And so how do we help those people get back on their feet and get going again? And what do we do if we can't? How are we going to rescue these small businesses if we can't get Salem to let us do that?
Okay. So I'm hearing one of the concerns is to have a grant or funds available for startup for when this comes to a close. The other is to have a multifaceted approach for opening in rural areas as opposed to the metropolitan areas, and advocate for that at the state level.
Yes, and I've looked into those different grants for myself. Number one, I don't have payroll, so I don't qualify for that. And the other one is a loan at 3 3/4%, which is, low interest. But so when I get out of this, now my business is deeper in debt and puts me more upside down. If I borrow $10,000, $20,000 to keep my trucking business so I can make my payments, when this all comes out in a year, I have to start making payments on that. And it's an additional debt to my business that I really can't afford to take on.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? Because we need to get on with the manager's report shortly.
Well, I have just one.
Sure.
On small businesses, could we not look at them business to business and have them actually set up a plan as to how they're going to be keeping all the safety, 6 feet, from business to business, like a flower business? Basically, they're going to deliver flowers to a doorstep and then run away. You're not going to see people. And if they could have some sort of a plan that reasonably, has safety involved and has an actual protocol on how they're doing things, why isn't it we couldn't, as a community, come up with something of that nature for small businesses to allow them to work under guidelines?
Did you have access to Mr. Forrester's report before he made it?
No, I didn't, but he and I think we think alike sometimes.
Thank you. But those are good points, Patricia. Thank you.
Steve, this is Janet. I would like to chime in on what Teresa said to start with. about she knows a couple individuals that had the symptoms and everything. It's just that they weren't bad enough to get, or they didn't fall into the criteria of getting the testing and that. And we're told, come back, and if your conditions get worse, then come back. So we don't know how many of those people are out there that might not be self-quarantined and are exposing other people to the COVID-19. So I'm really concerned about that, with the lack of testing in the area and people told to go home, and if your conditions get worse, then come back to the hospital. To me, I don't feel that's very acceptable.
I understand and appreciate your concern, as we all have that same concern, but do you have any direction for the council, that the council should take any action to cause a change?
No, but I think when you're talking to the, if you talk to the governor, or if you're in some of those meetings, you know, I don't know how many test kits that come out to Central Oregon, but when the one individual that I knew that I think had it, that had all the symptoms, they told that individual at that time that Central Oregon only had 1,000 test kits. And so they were only using them for people that had underlying conditions or over 65 and that. So that's my concern.
Okay. Well, then we can carry that. Steve and I can both carry that to the various meetings that we have with the folks upstairs. So.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Something that might be helpful for us is at our next meeting, either invite Todd Shields, who's president here of St. Charles Prineville, or Joe Sluka, CEO of St. Charles, to come in and just provide some data for us. How many are they testing? Who decides that? I think it'd be good for us to have that info.
I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would also encourage, I think just as important as Mr. Sluka or Todd Shields, I think would be Muriel from the County Health Department.
Right.
Her network of what's happening government-wise in terms of testing and treatment results, all those things. She's very, very adept at that, and she would also, I think, be a good resource for us at a council meeting, Mr. Papke.
And Dr. Maggie King is Chief of Staff for the hospital, so she's another resource that we could tap too. So
yep.
Probably we will, in all likelihood, have one or maybe two of those folks participate in the visitors' appearances section at the beginning of the next council meeting. But good suggestion, thank you.
Great.
Any other last comments? All right, well, let's move on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. I think that one in particular that's pertinent to this previous discussion. But first of all, staff wants to know, let the council know that city projects are continuing under construction, obviously under social distancing guidance. These projects include the Aquifer Storage and Recharge Project, the United States Forest Service Helibase building in conjunction with the county up at the Prineville-Crook County Airport, and then our administrative participation with the Community Development Block Grant Senior Center Remodel Project. All those projects are moving forward, again, under social distancing guidance. We are planning on providing a more detailed update on city projects as part of this Friday's mayor message, and we'll also have some additional updates that will be posted on our website. So we want to let everybody know, council and our citizens, that critical city projects are continuing under construction. The item I have tonight that's pertinent to our previous discussion has to do with what I would characterize as building a bridge for our local businesses in Crook County area, Prineville and Crook County, that may not exactly fit some of the criteria for the loans that the federal program has made available, the PPE and the CARE Act. So with that being said, the city has been working with local leaders from the Chamber of Commerce, Crook County, Economic Development of Central Oregon, EDCO, Facebook, the Downtown Association, Representative Brees Iverson, County Health Department, and COIC to form a COVID-19 Business Assistant Task Force here in Prineville. This group was formed to determine the priority needs and provide assistance to businesses in Crook County adversely impacted by COVID-19. Casey Kaiser here at the city, Mayor Uppelman, and I have been working with this group over the past few weeks. We will be forwarding to Council a staff report and recommendation outlining the process and asking for funding support from the city. Staff has also consulted with Finance Director Liz Schutte, and she's provided some funding availability options for Council consideration. One of the things that's come up with some of our budgeted items specific to the Council as it relates to meeting costs. When we have our regular meetings, we have a workshop with some food service opportunities, the travel to a lot of meetings outside Prineville, both on the city manager's budget and on the council budget. So those are cost avoidances that we are seeing right now, even though it's only been a matter of weeks. So there's some monies available that we can take a look at in helping fund this Crook County Business Assistance Task Force. And these will be $2,500 grants is what's proposed by the group. They have a process that will be shared with you for your review. And we will ask to have this as an agenda item at the April 28th council meeting. So I would expect this information to go out to council membership in the next few days. Please rely on Casey, Mayor Uppelman, Casey Kaiser, Mayor Uppelman, or myself to answer any questions. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to participate as a collective leadership team to really help out people like Teresa was describing a few minutes ago. So be looking for that, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And then finally tonight, some very interesting phenomenon as a result of the situation we find ourselves in and how we're conducting and our business and continuity of our local government here at the city. And the example would be as it relates to how many people are listening, how many people are watching programs like what we have tonight with City Council. To put that in perspective, last week the mayor's message received 4,700 views. And of that, 825 people watched the video in its entirety. And so this has been fairly consistent since the mayor started this mayor's message a couple of weeks ago. Also, we've had strong viewership and participation with our council meetings as well. We've had approximately 6,900 total people reached from the 3/24 regular meeting and the special meeting we have on April 7th, just a week ago. So almost 7,000 people are watching that, participating in that, and kind of to put a asterisk by this process is a very high percentage of the commentary we're getting on social media has been very positive. So I think this is something we need to be mindful of. I think we need to be strategic about it. I'd also like to thank James Wilson and Aaron and Daryl at IT for putting this together. I think it's something we can build upon as we go forward, even when we have this COVID-19 situation behind us. I think we're reaching out to a lot of folks, and I think they appreciate it. So that does conclude my report for tonight. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you.
Comments? Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Any comments from anyone? I think the mayor's message numbers were grossly inflated. I'm not sure where he got that number, but it's nice to have everyone's pretty quiet tonight. Okay, well that is all we have on our agenda. There are no other visitors' appearances, requests, comments to be made. So with that, it's time to adjourn the meeting. Does anyone want to make the motion?
I'll make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Teresa. From Janet?
Yes, Janet said she'd second.
Thank you. Jason? I'm calling for a vote.
Okay. Aye.
Janet?
Aye.
Tricia?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Teresa?
Aye.
Mayor votes aye, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.